ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੀ ਬਦਲ ਰਹੀ ਰਾਜਨੀਤਿਕ ਹਕੀਕਤ ਅਤੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਭਾਈਚਾਰੇ ਲਈ ਸਾਵਧਾਨੀ। ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਵੱਡਾ ਯਾਤਰਾ ਪਾਬੰਦੀ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਲਾਗੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ ਜੋ ਅਫਰੀਕਾ ਅਤੇ ਮੱਧ ਪੂਰਬ ਦੇ 12 ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਉੱਤੇ ਲਾਗੂ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਜਿਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਫਗਾਨਿਸਤਾਨ, ਈਰਾਨ, ਸੋਮਾਲੀਆ, ਲੀਬੀਆ, ਇਰੀਟਰੀਆ ਅਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਦੇਸ਼ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹਨ। ਇਹ ਨੀਤੀ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਵਾਰੀ ਟਰੰਪ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਆਈ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਮੁੜ ਲਾਗੂ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਯੂਰਪ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਰਾਈਟ ਵਿੰਗ ਰਾਜਨੀਤਿਕ ਵਿਚਾਰਧਾਰਾ ਤੇਜ਼ੀ ਨਾਲ ਵੱਧ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਪਿਊਰ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਦੀ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਅਨੁਸਾਰ ਯੂਰਪ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੁਸਲਮਾਨ ਆਬਾਦੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇਜ਼ ਵਾਧਾ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਜਿਸ ਨੇ ਕਈ ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿਆਸੀ ਅਤੇ ਧਾਰਮਿਕ ਤਣਾਅ ਪੈਦਾ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਹੈ। ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਦੋਂ ਪੱਛਮੀ ਮੁਲਕ ਕਹਿਣ ਲੱਗ ਪੈਣ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਮੁਲਕ ਕਤਰ, ਦੁਬਈ, ਸਾਊਦੀ ਅਰਬ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਤੋਂ 25 ਸਾਲ ਤੋਂ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਾ ਕੇ ਵੀ ਨਾਗਰਿਕਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਤੇ 10 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਤੋੜ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਹੋ। ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਪੱਛਮੀ ਮੁਲਕਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਕੰਮ ਕਰੋ ਤੇ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਬਣੋ। ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਗਵਾਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਭਾਰਤ ਦੇ ਬਾਹਰ ਵੱਡੀ ਹਲਚਲ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਅਕਸਰ ਸਿੱਖ ਭਾਈਚਾਰਾ ਨਿਸ਼ਾਨਾ ਬਣਦਾ ਹੈ। ਕਦੇ ਜਰਮਨੀ ਦੇ ਰਾਜਨੀਤਿਕ ਬਦਲਾਅ, ਕਦੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੀ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਨੀਤੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਕਦੇ ਯੂਰਪ ਵਿੱਚ ਧਾਰਮਿਕ ਟਕਰਾਅ। ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਆਂ ਅਤੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਪੀਲ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਆਪਣੇ ਪਿੰਡਾਂ ਅਤੇ ਜਾਇਦਾਦਾਂ ਦੀ ਦੇਖਭਾਲ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਕਰੋ। ਪੰਜਾਬ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਣੀ ਜੜ੍ਹਾਂ ਮਜ਼ਬੂਤ ਰੱਖੋ। ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਲਈ ਵਿਅਕਤੀਗਤ ਅਤੇ ਪਰਿਵਾਰਕ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਆ ਦੀ ਯੋਜਨਾ ਬਣਾਓ। ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਦਿਖਾਉਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਹਾਲਾਤ ਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਬਦਲ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਨ ਅਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਮੂਲ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ। ਦਸਤਾਵੇਜ਼, ਨਾਗਰਿਕਤਾ ਤੇ ਆਵਾਜਾਈ ਦੀ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀ, ਇਹ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਅਚਾਨਕ ਨਿਯਮਾਂ ਦੇ ਘੇਰੇ 'ਚ ਆ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ। ਆਪਣੀ ਮਿੱਟੀ, ਆਪਣੇ ਧਰਮ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਕੌਮ ਨਾਲ ਨਾਤਾ ਨਾ ਤੋੜੋ। ਵੱਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਹ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰ ਦੇਣ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ 9-10% ਤੱਕ ਠੀਕ ਸੀ, ਜਦੋਂ ਹੁਣ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੱਧਦੇ ਹੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਤੇ ਰੁਕਣ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੈਂਦੇ। ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਰਾਜਨੀਤਿਕ ਸਭਿਅਤਾ ਦਾ ਵੀ ਧਿਆਨ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ। ਕੰਮ ਲਈ ਮਿਹਰਬਾਨੀ, ਤਨਖਾਹ ਲਵੋ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਦੇਸ਼ ਜਾਓ। ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ 20-30 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਣਗੀਆਂ।
The number of Muslims living in Europe has been growing. In the middle of 2016, there were about 25.8 million Muslims in Europe. This includes the 28 countries that were part of the European Union at that time, plus Norway and Switzerland. This figure means that Muslims made up 4.9% of the total population in these European countries. This was a noticeable share and represented a significant community spread across the continent. Understanding these numbers is the first step to seeing how the population is changing over time and what factors are contributing to these demographic shifts. This 2016 figure showed an increase from a few years earlier. In 2010, the Muslim population in the same group of European countries was estimated at 19.5 million. At that time, Muslims represented 3.8% of Europe's total population. So, between 2010 and mid-2016, the number of Muslims in Europe grew by more than 6 million people. This growth also meant that their proportion within the overall European population increased by over 1 percentage point, indicating a faster growth rate compared to the non-Muslim population during this specific period. One of the main reasons for this increase was migration. Between the middle of 2010 and the middle of 2016, Europe saw many people moving to the continent. During these 6 years, an estimated 3.7 million Muslims migrated to European countries. This group of migrants included people who came for different reasons. Some were regular migrants, perhaps coming for work or education or to join family members already living in Europe. Others arrived as refugees, seeking safety and protection from conflict or persecution in their home countries. Muslims formed a large part of the total number of people who moved to Europe during this period. Specifically, Muslims accounted for 53% of all migrants, including both regular migrants and refugees, who arrived between mid-2010 and mid-2016. In total, Europe received approximately 3.7 million Muslim migrants and 3.3 million non-Muslim migrants in these years. This highlights that migration was indeed a very significant factor in the rising number of Muslims in Europe. The destinations and experiences of these migrants varied greatly across different European nations. Migration played a very important role in the growth of Europe's Muslim population between 2010 and 2016. Of the 3.7 million Muslims who arrived, about 2.5 million were regular migrants. The remaining 1.3 million Muslims either received refugee status or were expected to receive it. There was a notable surge in refugee arrivals, especially between early 2014 and mid-2016. During this shorter window, about 1.2 million refugees arrived, averaging 490,000 per year. This was much higher than the 110,000 refugees per year seen from mid-2010 to the end of 2013. Overall, 78% of all refugees who were granted or expected to get status were Muslim. Beyond migration, another key reason for the growth is that Muslim women in Europe, on average, have more children than non-Muslim women. Between 2015 and 2020, Muslim women in Europe were projected to have an average of 2.6 children. In contrast, non-Muslim European women were projected to have an average of 1.6 children during the same period. This difference in fertility rates means that even without any new migration, the Muslim population is likely to grow faster through new births. This natural increase is a fundamental demographic factor contributing to the changing population landscape in Europe. The age structure of the Muslim population in Europe also contributes to its growth. In 2016, Muslims in Europe were, on average, much younger than non-Muslims. The median age for Muslims was 30.4 years. For non-Muslims in Europe, the median age was significantly higher at 43.8 years. A younger population generally means that a larger proportion of people are in their prime childbearing years. It also means that there are fewer deaths compared to an older population. For instance, 27% of Muslims in Europe were under the age of 15, compared to only 15% of non-Muslims. These demographic factors, higher fertility rates and a younger age profile, lead to what is called natural increase. Between mid-2010 and mid-2016, births outnumbered deaths among Muslims in Europe by more than 2.9 million. While net migration added about 3.5 million to the Muslim population during this time, accounting for roughly 60% of the growth, this natural increase was also a very substantial component. It is important to note that religious switching had a very small impact, with a net loss of about 160,000 from the Muslim population due to people changing their religion during these 6 years. Researchers have looked at what might happen to Europe's Muslim population by the year 2050. They developed 3 different scenarios based on possible future migration levels. The first scenario is called the zero migration scenario. This scenario imagines that all migration into Europe stopped completely and permanently from the middle of 2016. Even in this situation, with no new migrants arriving, the Muslim population in Europe is still projected to grow. It is estimated it would rise to 7.4% of Europe's total population by 2050, which would be around 35.8 million people. This growth would happen because Muslims are younger and have more children than other Europeans. The second scenario is the medium migration scenario. This projection assumes that the large flow of refugees seen between 2014 and 2016 would stop. However, it also assumes that regular migration would continue at recent levels. Regular migrants are those who come for reasons like work, education, or to join family. Under this medium migration scenario, Muslims could make up 11.2% of Europe's population by 2050. This would mean an estimated 57.6 million Muslims living in Europe. This scenario suggests a more moderate pace of continued migration compared to the recent past's exceptional refugee flows. The third scenario is the high migration scenario. This scenario considers what would happen if the record flow of refugees that Europe experienced between 2014 and 2016 were to continue indefinitely into the future. It also includes the continuation of typical regular migration. If this high level of migration were to persist, Muslims could constitute 14% of Europe's population by 2050. This would translate to approximately 75.5 million Muslims. However, the report that outlined these scenarios also noted that the refugee flows seen from 2014 to 2016 were unusually high and had already started to decrease due to policy changes by the time the projections were made. It is also interesting to see how these changes fit within the broader European population trends. Europe's non-Muslim population is actually projected to decline in total numbers under all three migration scenarios. Without any future migration at all, Europe's total population, which was 521 million in 2016, was projected to shrink to an estimated 482 million by 2050. Under the medium migration scenario, the total population would remain roughly stable. Only under the high migration scenario would Europe's total population see a modest growth. This shows migration significantly impacts not just the Muslim population, but Europe's overall demographic future. The impact of these demographic changes will not be the same in every European country. For example, Germany had about 5 million Muslims in 2016, which was 6.1% of its population. Germany accepted the most refugees, 670,000, between mid-2010 and mid-2016. If migration continues at a medium level, Germany's Muslim population could reach 10.8%, around 8.5 million, by 2050. Under a high migration scenario, this figure could rise to 19.7%, around 17.5 million. This would mean Germany could have the largest number of Muslims of any European country in that particular scenario. France had the largest number of Muslims in Europe in 2016, with about 5.7 million, or 8.8% of its population. By 2050, even with zero future migration, France's Muslim population is projected to grow to 12.7%, around 8.6 million. With medium migration, it could reach 17.4%, or 12.6 million. The United Kingdom had about 4.1 million Muslims, making up 6.3% in 2016. The UK was a top destination for regular Muslim migrants. Under a medium migration scenario, its Muslim population could reach 16.7%, or 13 million, by 2050, potentially surpassing France and Germany in absolute numbers if these trends continue. Sweden is another country where significant changes are projected. In 2016, Sweden had about 810,000 Muslims, making up 8.1% of its population. Sweden accepted a high number of refugees per person relative to its population size. If migration continues at a high level, Sweden's Muslim population could reach 30.6%, around 4.5 million by 2050, which would be one of the highest shares in Europe. In contrast, countries like Poland had very few Muslims, 0.1% in 2016, and are projected to continue to have very small Muslim populations. Cyprus had the highest share in 2016, at 25.4%, and is projected to remain high. Public opinion about refugees and migration varies widely across Europe. In 2016, in countries that took in many refugees like Germany and Sweden, smaller shares of the public saw large numbers of refugees from Iraq and Syria as a major threat.